Hey everybody, Rob here. You know, the last couple weeks, Chris and I have had the best intentions to try to get caught up and keep this season rolling. And of course, life got in the way again. I got super sick. I got the flu. I got strep throat. I mean, I'm sure you can probably hear it in my voice right now. So we're planning to be back on track later this week and get completely caught up. So by next Wednesday, we are completely in line with the show. But for now, we thought, hey, we did a bonus episode at one of the podcast marathons out at the Blue Box Cafe. Let's throw this on here, give you something to listen to until we get those shows rolling. When they do hit, you should be getting like one a day for like 4 or 5 days in a row. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. I hope you guys enjoy this. Chris and I had a lot of fun with this episode.
Welcome to Disturbed, the American Horror Story podcast. Hear how happy I sound when I do that?
You're very
Never
happy.
sounds like that on the show. I'm Rob Southgate. With me is
Chris Mao.
And Chris, we're going to break form here.
Yes.
Normally what we do on our show is we go through each episode late, 9 months after it's aired. This time, we're right in the throes of the new season. It's what, season 8 or 7?
8.
Season 8. We're right in the throes of season 8. We've only posted one episode of the new season so far. It's really, really been fantastic. But we're not going to sit here and go through a show you guys maybe don't watch or you've already heard us talk about. So we're going to do something different. We're going to talk about, I found an article on Mental Floss where it talked about some of the real life stories that are integrated into American Horror Story.
Yes, and there's a lot, and there's more than is in
There's
this
way
article.
more than what's here. Yeah. So let's before we do that, let's give some social media. You can find this podcast on Facebook under Disturbed. You can also find us as Disturbed Pod on Twitter. I know we have an Instagram. I don't even have the password at this point, so we're not using it. But you can follow me on Instagram at Rob Southgate or follow the company at SMG Pods. Chris, where can they find you?
Absolutely. I can be found at Blue Box Cafe or Blue Box Cafe 176 on all sorts of social media.
And, like I said, this show is about American Horror Story. Does anybody out here listen to or watch American Horror Story? Too scared. Roanoke, you didn't like Roanoke. Okay. All right. Are you liking this season? Okay. I don't make a decision. We go all the way to the very end, and then we go, oh, that was awesome, no matter what it is.
Exactly.
So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the real-life stories that are integrated in. According to this article, the very first one I pulled up here was Richard Speck's Killing Spree. This is going way back in the series. The second episode of the series featured a flashback. Second episode.
Yep. They went for it all right away.
Directly inspired by serial killer Richard Speck, the sequence showed a man conning his way into a house full of female roommates and then murdering a nurse and nursing students inside. Okay, so I have a story about this.
Yes.
First of all, I knew what it was watching the series. As soon as that happened, I'm like, okay, they're going to try to integrate some of these real horrific events. Richard Speck is a terrifying story.
Yes, it's horrible.
But I have a story about Richard Speck, believe it or not. We should have the theme music for Believe It or Not. Or either that or Unsolved Mysteries. I'm Robert Stack.
Yeah.
Okay, my story. I'm not Robert Stack.
Okay.
I'm not Robert Stack. So my aunt lived in Jacksonville, Illinois, okay? And she tells, I wasn't there for this, but she told my wife this story, and then I confirmed it with her, so it's not like friend of a friend and a friend of a friend. But she told my wife this story, and my wife was like, oh my God, wait till you hear this. So when she was like in college, maybe a little older than that, she and her friend were driving along. This car that had 3 guys in it starts like harassing them, like kind of following them. And they're like, this is bizarre. Why they
right.
getting on them. So they were trying to figure out what to do. They're driving down the highway, and this car is like tailgating them and pulling up next to them, going, pull over, all this kind of stuff. And they were two women. They were terrified, right? And this would be, at this time, this was like 66, okay? Mm-hmm. They said that they finally saw like a gas station. So they thought, okay, they were both like crying and panicked. They're like, okay, there's a gas station. They pulled over into the gas station, and it was all lit up, and got out of the car and ran right in. I guess my aunt did. Said that these people were chasing him or whatever. The guy was like, oh, well, I don't see anybody, be safe. Because that's about how it was in the 60s. It's like, what are we going to do? There's no such thing as a cell phone. We barely have phones. He went out and did smoke signals. Poof, poof. So my aunt goes back to get in the car, and she gets in. They start to go. There's a dude in the back seat.
Oh.
He goes, pull over up here. You get in the back seat. So terrified they did. And my aunt got in the back seat. Her friend was driving. Mm-hmm. She got in the back seat with this dude. And he's just talking to him. He's not like threatening them with a knife or anything. He's just talking to him. But they're terrified, right? And these are those old cars at that time, probably new. She's looking and she notices his door isn't quite shut all the way, which, okay. Now you'd be able to tell because there'd be lights and dinging and all that. Then not even the interior lights really came on for that. So she could see that the door was ajar. So at one point, she turned and kicked him with both legs, kicked him right out of the door.
Wow.
Okay? And they tore off, crying, screaming. The other car that had been harassing him came up behind him. He must have gotten right in that car, and they just followed them, chasing them down the highway again. At some point, they got off. Okay? They stopped. Of course, they were really jarred by this. They were terrified of what they had just experienced. And she said, it's like a week later, she gets a call from her friend. She says, you got to turn on the news right now. They turn it on. There's a picture
of the guy?
Of Richard Speck, the guy who was in their back seat. Right, it was a week after this happened. So he was on the hunt. But who were the other two guys in the car?
Yeah, no kidding.
What was going on there? Now, I probably got a lot of the story wrong, but I got probably 80% accurate on that.
As long as you got the main part.
I got it pretty dang close. That is a terrifying story. And that happened to my aunt. Yes. And it's not like friend of a friend. Like I said, they were out with my parents. My wife was out with my parents. My aunt blows this story out there, and they're like, what the hell is this? Martha tells me, I went right to her, and I confirmed it. And she was like, oh, yeah, it was Richard Speck in our back seat. How awful is that? That's like you always hear those stories about Gacy, how Gacy always claims that there was another guy. I actually know a guy that used to hang out at that Forest Preserve that said, we were there when Gacy would pull in all the time.
Right.
Back before any of this happened, or it was happening, but we didn't know. This car would pull in, and he was known as this creep that was trying to pick boys up at the Forest Preserve. And he said, but he was never the guy driving. There was another guy driving, and he would get them to come in. You come on in. The restaurant's open. We're just doing a podcast marathon. Restaurant's open. You can have a seat. All right? So, okay, there's my Richard Speck story. What's next?
That's right. Oh, the Black Dahlia is the next one. So
now, which season was that? Was that in first season?
It was in Murder House. So they revealed that she was a guest at the Murder House. Her name was Elizabeth Short.
Right. Now, the Black Dahlia story is pretty fascinating. Mm-hmm. One of those unsolved mysteries, too. Like, there are a lot of people they cite as being the person. Right. But it's kind of like Jack the Ripper, where they go, this is who we believe it is. There is no concrete evidence as to who it is.
Right.
And it's a terrifying story. It's perfect fodder for American Horror Story.
Right. Well, kind of unsolved, a lot of doubt, but very horrific. And it's very, obviously the shock value was great in that.
Yeah.
Just to allude to it, but still it's, they're they're very good about throwing stuff out there. So, going back and getting off of the Black Dahlia, like they put Jeffrey Dahmer and Gacy and the Zodiac Killer in Hotel.
Right.
And didn't really do anything about their stories, but just kind of...
No, they were there,
They just kind of mentioned them, and you're like, oh my gosh. And it's crazy. And that's what
Zodiac kept the mask on the whole time.
Yeah,
That was freaking
fantastic.
weird.
So I was waiting for Jason to show up, but that's what they do. But yeah, they loosely mention it that they're a guest, and it was kind of like a passing by, but I think it added a lot of weight to the show.
It sure did. Well, you saw it was like this grouping of people that you went, man, I'm just terrified of all these guys.
Right.
So, yeah.
They pulled all of that stuff out of that.
Have you seen the movie, I think it's called Black Dahlia? It's a good movie. It's not great. I thought it was going to be better than it was because it's such a great story. It's so interesting. And the movie kind of, if I remember right, it kind of fell flat for me. I was a little disappointed. But there is a video game. Mm-hmm. I swear to you, it's not about this, but it is a moment in the game. It's called L.A. Noire. The guy who's the lead character in it is actually a guy that was on Mad Men. You watch Mad Men?
Yes.
He's the guy that got his foot ran over.
Right.
Okay, you know that guy, the blonde guy? So he plays a detective in L.A. At this time, and like 1945, something like that. And at one point in the game, you're going around L.A. and there's all these, it's a great, great game. But there's all these stories, kind of playing out. And at one point you go into a park and there is this woman with her cut like the Black Dahlia. And you kind of work your way through it, but you don't really solve it because they don't really solve it. There's they think it was this guy, and you go chasing him down, but he's not the guy that did it.
Right.
It's really, really great. Oh, now we're to the one I want to talk about. Dude, I'm way into this. This is UFO stuff. Here we go. What is it, Chris?
It's the abductions of Barney and Betty Hill.
Do you know this story?
A little bit, but not that much. Enlighten me.
So you're not a UFO guy?
No, not really.
I can talk UFOs for the rest of the week. I am a UFO guy, let me tell you. I saw Dr. J. Allen Hynek speak live at Harper College when I was a kid. I saw, what's his name? Stanton Friedman. I saw Stanton Friedman live. Amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm that guy. So the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, this is actually the first really big abduction story ever.
Okay.
They did it in American Horror Story in the second season. They remember how you had the African American, I think it was woman, and the Caucasian guy. Yes. That is Betty and Barney Hill.
Right.
He was African American. She was Caucasian. Think about that time period when this was happening. This is the 60s or 50s? 61 when this happened. And I mean, you have all the racial tension. You have all that kind of stuff going on. The UFO scene was something that was not. There was the panic because of the Cold War.
Right.
There were always, things going on about this stuff. Think about the movies at that time. There were all these, space invaders, those kind of movies and things. But the abduction thing, the nuts and bolts of, gray aliens and all that, none of that existed.
Mm-hmm. It was much quickly thereafter it did, but
you're right. But these two, they had this incident where they were driving along, they got pulled over and had this encounter, and it was later, during hypnosis, deep hypnosis, they started recalling an abduction. Mm-hmm. Really traumatic abduction story.
Sure.
Nobody heard of, hey, they took me onto a thing and they were doing medical experiments on me. That didn't exist. Nobody had ever talked about this. And these two, and people, this is the other thing. This is the other thing, man. When they have these kind of things, people always say, oh, they were looking for publicity. Who wants this publicity?
Right.
I mean, seriously. Do you think this helped their lives?
No.
And do you think at any point they thought it's helping their lives?
And, you can't make that stuff up. You can't.
Well, you can.
Well, no, you can, but, are you just going to come up with this at the spur of the moment and say, hey, this is what happened to me? I doubt it. That would have to be very calculated. very calculated.
Well, yeah, especially this story, especially when you have the regression stuff, which was also being, that was new.
If it happened now, you could go back and kind of pick details and be like, oh, you're making this up. If you create that from scratch, that's
and there's a lot of details in it. When you listen to the tapes and that, there's a lot that, number one, didn't exist. It wasn't in the zeitgeist of UFOlogy.
It was new ground.
There's also stuff that doesn't match up to what we know now, or we hear now.
What we think.
Because, like, the term flying saucer, they didn't look like saucers in the beginning. But this one reporter said, I saw a flying saucer, and the image became the saucer shape and all that. But in reality, that's only a sliver of the reports that were coming in. The gray aliens, the big heads. At this time, they were saying that they were in, like, shiny jumpsuits. There's just different things about the stories. But, this story is a really fascinating one. And it really, like, their lives were really crushed from this. And I believe he ended up getting, like, cancer and dying pretty early, not long after this whole thing, which was something he got, like, a cancer that would have been that could have been a result of this. Like he said, I was probed this way, and guess where he got cancer? Boom. And no sign of it before that.
Sure.
I could have that detail wrong.
But I'm in
a marathon. I'm going to get things wrong.
We're an hour in.
This story is fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
And when they brought it into the show, they played with it. I almost wish a story like this, they had almost portrayed it a little more accurately to the story. Mm-hmm. And riffed off of that.
But they used the hint of it, and I think that's a genius of American Horror Story, where they will liken it back to these horrific things, but then they put their twist. And I think that's
Right. No, I get that. It's just, I think they did a good enough job that I wanted an even more accurate job. It's a fascinating story, man. And it's actually not the first. It's the one that is always cited as the first, but there are actually a couple of stories before that. And there's a big one I just was listening to a podcast about. Dang if I can't remember what it is. Sorry, podcast. I can't help you out on this. But they were talking about this abduction that happened, and it was like 2 years before Betty and Barney Hill. And it might have been was it the Andreessen affair?
Yeah.
It might have been.
It might have been, yeah.
Which was also very big, but it was not the Betty and Barney Hill scope of big. Do you remember there was a TV movie about this? And James Earl Jones played Barney Hill.
James Earl Jones and Estelle Parsons were the actors in the movie called The UFO Incident.
Yeah.
A 1975 TV movie.
It's so good. I have so many good UFO stories. And once again, not friend of a friend stories. Well, friend of me stories. Like people,
so to me, it's a friend of a friend.
Well, so here's the deal. At one point, I thought, you know what? I'd like to do something with this. So I had this idea to do this project about UFOs, where I was going to collect people's stories. Just tell me your story. I'd record it. And then I would have a comic book artist make either a comic of it or just a still image that kind of told the story through a single image. I thought, what a cool idea. What a cool project, right? Mm-hmm. So I started saying it to people like, I'm working on this project. I'm collecting UFO stories. Do you know, when I started doing that, it was easily like 50% of people that I said it to told me stories.
Oh, sure.
Personal stories. Oh, yeah. And what they would do is they'd go, this is what they do. I only recorded like 2 because they'd go, I have a really good story that happened to me, but you can't use it. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And they're like, well, you can't. I have one that was so good, and I can't say who it is. It's somebody I know, and this person's wife is so, like, against this story ever getting out that I had to promise I will never reveal
the source.
And I can't even really tell you the story over this, because if she hears it, she's going to know he told me the story. But it's such a good one. So, yeah, I dig that. Now, does that mean that I'm sitting here going like, everything's an alien, everything's an UFO? No. But do I think there's stuff going on? Yeah. I think it's ridiculous for us to think that we're the only thing out there.
That's funny. I was just going to say that. I believe that too, but we're so, I don't want to say we're led to believe, I think in our own insecurity, we want to believe that we're the dominant species, and
which is
dumb. Even in the evolution of this planet, we aren't.
No,
we're dominant now, but we won't be in a little bit, and we weren't.
Right,
and that's just part of life.
I tell you what, they start bringing dinosaurs back, and we're no longer the dominant species.
Hey, we could make a movie about that.
We could. Da, 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 da.
We'll get Steven Spielberg. It'll be fantastic.
As long as Jeff Goldblum's in it.
Because he is the dominant species.
He
Jeff
is
Goldblum
the dominant species.
You were excited about the alien one.
Here we go.
I'm excited about the Delphine LaLaurie story in New Orleans because she was as horrific as a person as there could be, and they brought her into Coven. And number one, it's Kathy Bates, who
was amazing,
unbelievable, but she was just a horrific person that would torture people and torture slaves, and she was real, and
when they showed that scene when they go up into her, I think it was her attic.
It's her attic. It's the attic of horrors.
The slave is splayed out, and he's alive, and you're like, this is insane. And then I start reading about her, and that was pretty much true.
Right, and she
kept these people alive
and tortured them,
splayed out, and tortured them. I mean, it's a crazy
and they double
story.
dipped on this because they did that in what was the last one? No, after Roanoke, there was another one after Roanoke.
Yeah, it was the election one.
I can't think of the name of it. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. It's my many age. But they even did that in that one too, where they're he's up in the attic and he's torturing the guy hanging.
Right.
Which is a different kind of thing. But they double
dipped on that torturing. It wasn't her, but it was that same kind of like terror in the attic idea, which was a real thing.
Right, but I mean,
this is a story that once again you didn't really see before this.
No.
I didn't know this story. When I started seeing it, I was like, I wonder if this is a real character. I type in, I go and I Google her name, and I'm like, what? It's all real. Yikes.
If you go to New Orleans and go on one of the haunted houses tours, they talk about this. I mean, this is front row and center. Like, this is the despicableness of New Orleans, or this is the underbelly and the things that happened, because it's pretty lawless there, or was pretty lawless. I mean,
sure.
The oldest bar in North America is there because it's where the pirates hang out and stuff. I mean, it's crazy like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's there, and this is legit.
Well, there's always all those like vampire stories and all that take place there because there's something going on, and that's even an interesting thing. And they touched on it in, I don't know if it's in this list, but they did touch on that because obviously because of Anne Rice, there's all that vampire lore, but that was there. Sure. She started writing that because that was there.
Absolutely.
And if you start researching that, there are people that fully believe the vampires are there.
Right.
And it may not be what we think of as a vampire that we've seen in the movies and all that.
Right.
But this kind of out of bounds being.
Oh, sure.
Well,
if there was a place that they would be in America, it would be there or Vegas, because we
need to make a Vampires in Vegas movie.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That would be amazing.
And they just walk between in the inside because of all the malls and stuff in the underground tunnels.
They never have to go outside.
No. It's all at night.
And think about how easy the hunting would be.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have a conspiracy in it where the maybe there's a few hotels that are in on this, and they have blacked out areas where they let them feed and do their thing. Right. Somebody's hitting way too hot or is causing a problem for the hotel, and they pull them into the other room and they let Lady Gaga kill them. That would be freaking amazing.
And the mafia is actually
we own that.
We own that.
Las Vegas Vampires.
Vegas Vampires. So but that was there. And then
Axeman,
that kind of runs into the.
It's the same thing, but you know what? That's a crazy story that was real. And we didn't do that episode. That was before our time.
Yes.
And it was Scott and Jeff were doing the show at that point. And I was typing in, trying to find an image to use, and I found there was like an old album of the Axeman.
Right.
Like, this is something that people have talked about, stories have been told forever. That season was
2.
3.
It wasn't.
2 was the alien abduction.
Oh yeah, we had not done We had not done the show, but
we didn't do 1, 2, or 3.
Right.
We started with 4.
And I was totally in. No, didn't we finish 3? Maybe not. I can't remember. Probably not.
We did. We don't finish anything.
We finished 4.
We did. So yeah, man, that one is a really, really great one. Now this one is terrifying because we're in Chicago.
Yes.
But John Wayne Gacy.
And we were totally of the right age. I mean, that was as close to home about all of this stuff as anybody. I mean, Spec was right when I was born. And I remember being young and people talking about
1942.
1942. But Gacy was, I don't want to say we could have been one of those kids, but that was
man. No,
we were right there.
He wasn't that far from where Martha grew up.
No.
When we
He's not far from any
when
of
we were
us.
dating, we would drive by the house, but the house is gone.
Yes.
So you have this old Chicago neighborhood, all these little salt box type houses.
The bungalow.
And then on the corner
Craftsman.
is this one that was like Craftsman.
Yeah.
But on the corner is this one like bizarre like eyesore. It's a completely different, weird. Somebody bought the lot cheap and put up a house, and it doesn't match anything. So it makes it even more bizarre.
Sure.
I got a story. So not only did we drive by there, and I'm sure you did too.
Yes.
But Chris would go get Superdog and hang out in front and just sit there and eat.
That's not anywhere close to there, by the way.
But
you might go to Gene and Jude's. That's a little bit closer, but Superdog is nowhere close to that.
I would still go. I'd travel a mile for a Superdog. I don't care. I'd walk a mile for a Superdog. That's their new. That is not. Okay, so my friend I was working with, he was a guy that was a little older than me, and he grew up in that neighborhood, and he was like, he had a voice like this, so I'm going to have to do the impression the whole time. He's like,
no, you don't.
Yeah, I grew up in the neighborhood with Gacy, and the way we got on the subject was we were talking about like friends that we had, and telling like stories about our childhoods, and he goes, well, then my friend, we'll say Timmy. It was something like Timmy. Timmy got eaten by a clown. And I'm like, we were just talking about like what we did on recess. What's his story? Like
Timmy got eaten by a clown.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, he was one of Gacy's victims. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And he was telling me, and he's not the one that was at the forest preserve though. Remember I told you there was
Right.
somebody. This guy grew up in the neighborhood. He said, yep, Gacy dressed up as Pogo the Clown, and he'd come out and do little shows for the kids in the neighborhood on the front lawn. He goes, I sat there with my friends, and we watched this guy do his things. And he said, my friend went missing, and was one of the bodies recovered in the crawl space. What in the heck? It's so terrifying. Well, it's not like magically going to fix mental disorders. So it's going to happen. That stuff is out there. But the fact that he was a clown and he dressed up this way.
Well, he was known in the neighborhood, although there are renditions, of course, after the fact that people knew that he was different. But he was there. He was out in the public, and that I don't want to say what a great cover, but there was that stuff hidden in plain sight. It was right there, and this happened, and it only took, and the only way they found him is that he was under watch, but he got found because he was stupid,
right?
Because he's digging new things in his backyard in the middle of the night, and what contractor does that?
No, but think about, they say his wife, for the first part of it, before she disappeared on him, I left him,
right?
She's in the house, he's in the garage, which is attached, doing this. How did she not hear anything?
Exactly. Well,
you'd have to.
But you might not.
I sneeze downstairs and I get yelled at.
Yeah, but you might do that if you were killing somebody, Martha, by like, oh, he's just sneezing. Well, I'm just saying we are great as human beings of seeing, number one, what we want to see, but ignoring a lot of things. We could, we walk down the street and there are people literally, and I hate to be like on a political soapbox, dying that we walk over and by all the time.
Right.
And we have no problem with that. But other little things like, your hot dog is wrong and you're out of your mind because, oh my God, I paid 70 cents for a hot dog and that was nuts.
True.
And that's just us. And we won't do, we'll do that. But
how about the Cecil Hotel?
Well, and speaking of Chicago, because they did a whole, that's the murder. That's a sin in the White City, right?
Yes.
So
there were two things going on here.
But I'm just saying that
this is talking about the Cecil Hotel, which is in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Which what we saw was based on. Okay. And there's a lot of stories about the Cecil Hotel and this kind of stuff going on.
It was totally this.
But as soon as they brought in Evan Peters' character, it became the murder hotel from Chicago. Which, there's a lot of stories about. I mean, if you read Devil in the White City, it talks all about it. The show Lore, Aaron Mahnke does an excellent episode about it.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a lot of speculation that the things that we know at this point, a lot of it is blown out. Like it didn't have some of the things. They're saying he didn't kill as many people, and it didn't have quite the stigma. Because when you think about it, the story we're told, it's like it could have been in countless people,
right?
And he had all these things. He didn't have quite as much as you think. But then again, I've also heard contrary stories that say no, it's actually worse than what we heard.
Probably. Well, because
this show really made it worse.
Well, because it combined a lot of things. It combined the vampire part of it and this undead, and then the ghosts and the killing. And
right.
it was like
that was, I believe, that part of what the Cecil was.
That was the Cecil part, but then they got to
a lot of serial killers were there,
right? And they got to the murder hotel. I mean, and then they embellished and said, "Oh well, these guys showed up too, and I did this." And
right.
I mean, they did a good job of taking the rumors and the hints of all these things and putting them together in a cohesive unit, because it was all that stuff. I mean, but the guy he had garbage chutes that went to incinerators in the basements. The guy in Chicago, he changed contractors so nobody knew what was going on.
Right.
They had sealed off rooms that never went to any place. They had rooms that had one-way doors so people couldn't get out. I mean, that's all there.
It was a murder hotel.
Yeah. I mean.
Oh, really? Sure. Interesting. So, yeah. Murder hotel is, well, there is truth to it. We know people were killed there.
Right.
We know that this stuff happened. Well,
sure.
Right.
Well,
right.
and it just maybe too. I mean, the reality is that in the late 1800s, early 1900s, people died, and instead of taking them to a morgue or doing it, people dug up the earth and put people in the ground. I mean, that
did happen.
That's part. I mean, and there was plague, and it's not like the standards are today where they're, we know that that's a horrible thing. When people passed, they just passed, and that's what they did.
Well, there's actually, they did that, and then also the way that Mudgett, what's his name? H.H. Holmes.
Uh-huh.
Mudgett's his real name. What he was doing is he was killing people, and sorry to say this in a restaurant, but he was taking the bones and selling them to medical schools,
right,
because they needed skeletons and things. So that's what he was doing to make money off of his hobby. Which, if we could figure that out for podcasting, I wonder.
Their jaw's a little strong because they talk a lot, but that's besides the point.
We're back on New Media Lab. How do you make money at podcasting? Well, I sell the cadavers back to medical schools.
Here, put this gas mask on. You'll sound much better.
Well, it is a podcast, so you might want to wear a gas mask half the time.
That's true.
So let's see. What else was happening? That's it for the list, but that's not all there is. Like, if you go to last season, that cult stuff, there were shadings of a number of cults in there.
God, yeah.
And the way Evan Peters' character, his charisma and everything, he reminded me of Jim Jones.
Or
Jim Jones,
David, he was Koresh-ish too.
He had Koresh elements, but the reason I say Jim Jones, before people knew what he was doing, he was like a pillar of society.
Right.
He was the one bringing the races together, and at the same time, he had this other thing going on.
Right.
And it got crazier and crazier and crazier, and then boom.
Well,
if you watch
the Kool-Aid at the end, where you have to, that was very Jim Jones. But.
Yep. So, but that was just one part of the story.
Right.
But that was one that they didn't put in the article, but it was definitely, there's more than one cult thing going on there, but Jim Jones was definitely a big one, and David Koresh was a big one in there.
Right.
I also think that you have, take like John Hinckley shooting the president.
Right.
The way they played out the shooting.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That was very Hinckley-esque.
Well, and the way that they changed it because of what happened and the way which they did. I think that episode was better the way they handled it.
Yeah. Well, and it was also the Manchurian Candidate. You and I talked about that on our show a lot. That Manchurian Candidate thing was definitely heavy in there. The other thing is Freak Show. When they did that was, I can't cite a specific, but there were freak shows that were still touring. In fact, when I was dating Martha, we were at a carnival and there was a touring freak show.
Sure.
And we paid to go in. We thought, this will be fun. And then we got in there and it was like, whoa, you're paying money to see people. It was so sad.
Sure.
It was so sad.
I remember.
I thought it was going to be like magic, like a trick,
right?
And be fun, and it was not at all.
I remember as a child going to the Wisconsin State Fair, and they had.
Do people pay to see you?
I was cute.
They still have a statue
believe it or not,
made of cheese.
I peaked at like 5, and it's been a slow descent since then. But
not as slow as you think.
I'm 52, so that's pretty good.
Did they carve you out of cheese?
They did. No, but I'm just saying they had. That was there. They had the bearded lady. They had the guy with the freaky foot. I mean, all that stuff. The guys that rode the motorcycles.
Guy with the freaky foot?
There was a guy that had this like weird growth. I mean, it was they had the whole shot.
I could technically be on that.
You could. The guy with a lot of gas. That would be you. You'd have
Meet
to be
the amazing Skintago.
No, but I mean that was, and it probably was the earlier mid '70s. But I remember seeing that in the they'd ride the motorcycles in the globe, the whole shot.
Well, that's a circus thing, the motorcycles in the globe.
Right, but that was part of that kind of whole carnival freak show kind of thing.
The real freak show thing is like people with deformities.
No, it was the fat guy. It was
the fat guy
that
rode the motorcycle?
No.
Oh, man, I'm going to pay for that.
It was part of that whole thing. So
as much as I'm like, it's sad, fat guy on a motorcycle riding one of those things, you got my money.
We could just go to my house later and see that.
Yeah, we could get the two. Remember the two brothers in Guinness Book?
Yes.
Oh, that was my dream.
You're sad.
We could get you, me, a Lil. Scott, you got to put some weight on.
The heaviest
we
podcast.
could do it this week in Geek. We could get little mini bikes, and we'll get white go-go boots or those little shoes.
Oh, we'll get jumpsuits.
Jumpsuits, we'll get motorcycles, and we'll just ride around. We're not doing a show anymore. We're just going to look like that.
We'll be the flying fat Elvises. He's thinking about a way to pay for it.
We'll pull over every once in a while. Scott will get out and play Magic, and then we'll get back on our bikes, and off we go.
Play Magic while he's riding the bike. That would be the best.
I don't think there's room if we're all going to be the big fat guys on those little mini bikes.
Scott can do it. I don't know. So
Scott can do it.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to say, just going back over to what we were talking about in Disturbed, I think they've done a really good job of coming up with creative ways to tie real life either situations or stories. I mean, like the Roanoke thing.
Oh my God!
I mean, that is. I mean,
so
that was fan. I mean, they took a real rumor or myth, turned it into
a real story.
A real story. But I mean, it's who knows actually what happens, and then turn it into this insane.
Oh my gosh! But the story, the Croatoa, all that stuff, that's all real up to that point. They just don't know what happened. Now you want to hear? I got a story. So the other night, Croatoa. The other night we did a reading. Otherworld Theater in Chicago does a writer's prompt. It's such a cool idea. They put a prompt out there. People write up to 4 pages of a story based on the prompt, and then they get actors to read them. So Molly and I, my daughter Molly and I, got to read at this prompt. First of all, here's a fair warning for everybody. Don't go after Molly. She was
hey, don't you know the first 2 rules? Never follow a kid.
And don't follow Molly. Molly was the last one on the bill. She made the rest of us look like amateurs. It was unbelievable. But so in one of the writing prompts, it was all about time travel, right?
Right.
And in this story, what the guy did was he got a time machine, and he was talking about how, like, yeah, I'm going to go through history and I'm going to do this. And he's like, first one I go to, boop, 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 boop. And he's like at, what was he at first? Each thing he was at was awful. Like, he's like, I went to the theater. I didn't know it was the same theater that Abraham Lincoln was at. That was disgusting. Nice. And then he's like, each one was just, and then at one point he's like, I went to November 22nd, 1963. Why did I go to that?
I went to the library in Dallas. He was like,
I'm standing there watching a parade. Oh, no. And at one point,
it sounds like he has Southgate luck.
Yeah, right. He starts telling this story, and he's like, there's nobody here. It's really weird. And why does it say Croatoa on the thing? And Martha, who didn't know the story prior to American Horror Story, was like, oh my God, that's crazy. It was like it was this little sliver there, but she knew it because of American Horror Story.
Croatoa. Was Lady Gaga there?
I wish. She could do poker. Poker face. I kind of did the wrong song. My poker face. There it is. Ra 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 ra. Ga 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 ga. That's all I know.
I'm speechless and horrified. Talk about a horror story.
Oh, Speechless. I can sing that too. Speechless.
That's supposed to be silent, too.
Speechless. That's from Hamilton.
Yes.
I do them all. That's going to
Well,
be at 11
do
p.m.
them all
tonight.
as a-
Even though the marathon is over at 9, I'll still be here. It's my one-man show.
singing
I'm
show
singing
tunes?
all the hits. Yeah, I'm going to be doing show tunes because I love show tunes.
You should.
That is a lie, Internet. I'm not a big show tune guy.
No, you're not.
Not unless it's South Park.
If there was... And you
I
can't
can do those
and you
songs. Hold
can't-
on, let me do it. Uncle. Oh, well, I'll save that for
you,
later.
You can't
I'll
do
do that
the-
at 11 o'clock.
You can't do the first song of the movie, so it doesn't matter. We're not going to swear except for the first song.
Oh, but I want to.
Yes.
Oh, I love that movie. Those are the musicals I know. Uncle.
That heavy metal, Spinal Tap. You're
I love
you're big
that.
on those musicals.
Spinal Tap is not a musical.
It's a documentary.
It's a
It's a rockumentary.
It's a rockumentary, yes. How dare you? It's all real.
It's real in their heads.
It sure is.
Up to 11. It's fantastic. It's the
That's
best.
right. And that's like a Southgate Media Group joint. When they brought out the Stonehenge that was 11 inches, I'm 11 feet.
But it's at least it was
But
finished.
the two stripes means inches.
It's
Huh?
just, yes.
Yeah. All right, are we done?
I think we're done. We've
All
been
right.
just for a while, just haven't stopped talking.
Well, we talked our way right through Pop Culture Countdown. Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Countdown, everybody. What's the next show?
Favorite shows.
Oh, you guys are the next show. All right. That's it for Disturbed.
What's the next show?
And kind
Who
of for
dis?
Pop Culture Countdown. Yeah, Who Dis is up next. So thank you for listening, everybody. We've got another, I don't know how many hours left. I'm already getting slap happy, so it's going to be real. It's going to be like Jerry Lewis. I'm going to start skipping around the stage and
We have
sweating and being
10
abusive
and
to
a
kids.
half hours.
Yeah, I'm going to be smoking and being abusive to children. So good thing you're here,
he's
Jacob.
great.
You're the one who's going
Marvelous
to
in
catch
the industry.
the shrapnel. So yes, it's a normal weekend.
Leave it to Scott to not say anything for 2 months and then comes
and then
out.
comes up with a shot.
He slays.
That's right. All right, that's it. You want to give your social media one more time?
You know what? I'm pimping GeeksCon.
Do it.
So October 6th and 7th in historic downtown Elgin, not 200 yards from Blue Box Cafe. Alil and I are hosting GeeksCon, bringing the geeks to you. An affordable, no frills comic book convention on Saturday and Sunday. Check us out on Facebook, social media, our website.
Yeah. Yeah. Geeks with a Z. Make sure you
Z.
say that.
Geeks with a Z.
Con. Geeks.
We'll talk about that in League
Con.
of Geeks. So
We will. Oh, I'm sure. And also, as long as you're pimping that,
Pimp.
on Saturday the 6th, if you're not out here, you're in the city of Chicago, we are hosting the Women in Podcasting Festival at the Otherworld Theater venue, and that's during the day.
Right.
It's from 10 to 4.
keynote speaker, Martha
Southgate is keynote speaker. She's got a hell of a
Right.
message.
Who was supposed to be here at 10 and it's 10:30 and she's not here in true Southgate fashion.
No. They'll be here at 11, they said.
11. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, Molly will be here. And then I'm going to have to go after Molly, so I'm dead meat today. You know how that works.
Yes.
Okay, so check out Women in Podcasting Festival, check out GeeksCon, and check out all the amazing stuff we have coming up at the Blue Box Cafe.
Yes.
Lots of stuff. And
What's
follow
our
us,
closing
go
for
to our
this thing?
website. That's where we post all the events. Or follow us on Twitter at SMG Pods, or on Instagram at SMG Pods, or follow me, Rob Southgate, on Instagram, or R Southgate on Twitter. That's it.
Hey, it's right here.
We'll be
All your
back.
stuff.
Yeah.